All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Thursday. Last retreat of the first trimester here. So wanted to leave you guys a short lesson with the idea of doing a few things for classwork today. What I would just like to do is finish up with section one and ultimately introduce section two. On Tuesday, we had left off talking about China and the idea of the spheres of influence, okay, where many European countries, as well as Japan, wanted to have a stake and a designated territory for trade in China specifically. And that, in many ways, concerned the United States, which is why Secretary of State under President William McKinley, John Hay, issued a message and put into writing essentially that the United States wanted China to continue or at least try to be an open door, okay, with the idea that not just the United States but all countries should be able to trade wherever in China, not just in designated territories, so to speak. Now, the origins of this, and I'll come back to this a little bit more so in section two with the Spanish American War, is that the United States, after winning the Spanish American War, had a lot of continued interest in Asia. So, this whole spheres of influence thing that developed with European powers like Great Britain and France and Germany, Russia, and now Japan, those five countries, there was a concern on the part of the United States that they may be blocked out of trade with China. So, this idea of an open door policy emerged, okay, that the United States wanted to be assured, okay, obviously for them, making it very much, about everybody, but the reality was this was about the United States having an opportunity to trade and to continue to grow their economy with what was going on in China. Now, this right here is a very famous political cartoon of the time, a little bit of yellow journalism, so to speak, when we talk about Uncle Sam there with a huge key. All right, you can see above his head we have China here, all right, as if it is an actual door, so to speak, all right, and people from all different countries looking to get in, so to speak. So the United States definitely coming at the heels of a victory in the Spanish-American War. The reality is feeling very much confident to have their stake, but they didn't want to make any territorial claims. They didn't want to try to make it sound like they were trying to colonize China. In reality, that's what those European countries and Japan were trying to do. China had gone through their own civil war. So you're seeing a lot of Western influence in China, and you're seeing a lot of Japanese influence in China, which in many cases is not going to sit well with the general population of China, which is what leads to the Boxer Rebellion. With all that was going on in China in 1900, an event that became known as the Boxer Rebellion, a name given by Europeans or also known as the Boxer Uprising, was a violent uprising by Chinese citizens. Okay, and essentially it got started with a secret society, a secret organization known as the Society of Righteous and Harmonious Fists. Okay, this kind of like similar to last year we talked about the Sons of Liberty leading up to the American Revolution. I'm covering that now with seventh graders. We talked about the Sons of Liberty, very vocal about not wanting the British to be there and organizing secret events like the Boston Tea Party and essentially what happened there. Has some parallels, not all the same, but somewhat similar. And this particular group of people wanted to lead an uprising to stop the spread of European culture into China as well as Japanese culture. And Japan and China, in most cases, did not get along throughout the 17th, 18th, 19th, and obviously into the 20th century in what we are going to wind up going over in the second trimester. Now, when the Boxer Rebellion gets started, it actually is going to where a lot of violence is going to wind up taking place is in Beijing, the capital of China. And the original targets of these boxers, so to speak, and that was the name given to them by the Europeans, hence the Boxer Rebellion, was to go after Christians. All right, so many Chinese Christians as well as Christian missionaries, all right, were going to be subjected to violence, so to speak, All right, these Boxers wanted to destroy churches, and remember, Christianity is a Western religion, so to speak. Um, and for China, this was an example of Europe trying to extend its culture and its beliefs into Chinese society here. Okay, the following day, on June 20th, when the Boxers began essentially to lay siege in Beijing, they're going to declare war officially, at least with this small group, on all foreign nations. All right, so they're basically declaring war on Great Britain. They're declaring war on France. They're declaring war on Germany, Japan, and Russia, all the spheres of influence, and in many cases, obviously, indirectly, the United States. So essentially, what those countries now need to do is they essentially will form an alliance, so to speak, of forces from really all over Europe. Okay, so countries that didn't necessarily, like I believe Austria, Hungary, and Italy even may have sent forces here, but the idea was that something needed to be done in order to put down this rebellion. So, as we have here in the notes, eventually put down by European and U.S. forces violently. Once we see that Western alliance with Japan formed, okay, in September of 1901, we will see an end to the Boxer Rebellion. When we think of the amount of casualties involved, the Western Alliance will suffer few casualties, especially due to the fact that we were far superior with weaponry and technology at this time, while the Boxers, who had strengths of over, well, historians believe, of over 100,000 soldiers who were willing to fight, they will suffer high casualties, essentially going up against these European powers. But what it goes to show you is, and very much this is a fallout from imperialism, okay? This is an idea that countries are interested in other parts of the world in order to expand trade and find opportunities to make money. And most obviously, we'll continue to see that continue, and even including with the United States as we move into the 20th century. So, a lot of things going on here in Section 1, from the acquisition of Alaska and Hawaii to talking about the spheres of influence here, his manifest destiny over, and obviously a fallout from this idea of imperialism here out and over in China. So, and we see that kind of continuing in Section 2 as we introduce the Spanish-American War. All right, Section 2 is going to talk about the Spanish-American War, which is a rather interesting and sometimes forgotten war to discuss as far as the United States and its involvement. The war itself with Spain is actually a war that takes place over the span of 3 months, so it's not all that long. All right, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do directly with the United States at the beginning as far as reasons for the war. All right, but obviously a conflict that amounts to a decisive and a convincing American victory here. This picture, a very famous picture, all right, if you look closely, this guy should look a little familiar here, 1898, a future president, Theodore Roosevelt, and the Rough Riders, okay, and we'll get into specifically what they were doing here at San Juan Hill in Cuba during the war. Okay, as just a quick introduction, and we'll get into this a little bit more tomorrow after your Section 1 quiz. All right, but the origins for the Spanish-American War actually start, as I just mentioned, in Cuba. All right, and Cuba had been a Spanish colony, a possession of Spain since 1492. Hopefully that year rings a bell a little bit for you. All right, with the idea that it is one of the islands in the Caribbean that Christopher Columbus had famously claimed for Spain, and it continued to be a Spanish colony all the way here into the 19th century. But due to a Cuban uprising, all right, questioning especially, why should they continue to be colonies and why should they continue to be oppressed by the Spanish, what we're going to see in a similar way is Cubans look to rise up against Spain and fight for their own independence, all right? And Spain is very much going to be very harsh towards anyone associated with this. And then by 1895, and we'll talk about what reconcentration is tomorrow, all right, 200,000 Cubans die, okay? And for the United States here, there was some interest, especially considering Cuba is an island nation to our south and considered to be a neighbor, and this is a time period where the United States felt very confident in how to handle foreign affairs. So tomorrow we're going to get into the United States' response to what was going on in Cuba, and specifically as to why we wind up going to war, with the tagline of "Remember the Maine." So that might sound maybe somewhat familiar to you, but we'll get into this more tomorrow. So what I want you to do now is head to Schoology. There's 2 classwork assignments. All right, one is a little bit of review from section 1 as far as a worksheet on Hawaii. And then secondly, what I am going to ask that you do is work on some trimester review Quizlets. All right, I've given you instructions in Schoology to work on that. So please make sure that that's ready to go. Tomorrow after your quiz, we'll be using the human random button selector to get some of your Quizlets up, and we'll try to get some review in. Alrighty? Make sure you say thank you to your sub. I will be around after school if anyone needs anything, so feel free to stop in. Take care.